Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you here. Thanks for joining. My name is Alex Wiseman. I am a professor here at Texas Tech University in the College of Education, and also I am the director of the Center for Innovative Research in Change, Leadership, and Education, which we call CIRCLE, thankfully. I'm so happy that you're here to join us for, excuse me, our virtual brown bag today by Dr. Garcia, also the immediately previous director of the CIRCLE Center, who's going to talk to us today about dual credit programs and their impact on rural and urban students. So thank you for attending. There are a couple things that I wanted to say before we get started. One is that this expanded virtual brown bag series is something that we do all year long, well, all academic year long, so the fall and the spring semesters. If you are interested in any of the other talks that we might have, or you don't know what those other talks are, if you simply Google TTU and the word expanded, we should be one of the first hits on your Google search list. And you can then scroll through all the different talks we have coming up in the next few weeks and months. For example, we have another talk just this next week on Tuesday at the same time, where we're going to hear from Dr. Erica Gallagher talking about international schools and some of the challenges of their rapid expansion. I also wanted to share with you that our center, the Center for Innovative Research and Change, Leadership, and Education at Texas Tech, is focused on supporting communities and our community partners who are engaged in educational change, who are interested in doing whatever they can to ensure the equal distribution and access to education among teachers and students from all communities. We're very active in our research and in our community partnerships, and I would encourage any of you who are interested in doing more with the center, just let me know. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that. We are joined today, like I said already, by Dr. Hugo Garcia. I'm very happy to have him be a part of our talk today. Just a little bit about Dr. Garcia. He's an associate professor at Texas Tech University in the higher education program. He obtained his BA in International Relations from UC San Diego, his MED in Higher Education Administration and Student Affairs from the University of Southern California, and a Ph.D. in Education with an emphasis in Higher Education from Claremont Graduate University. His research interests pertain to access in higher education, retention of underrepresented students at 2- and 4-year post-secondary institutions, international higher ed, social issues in higher ed, and P20 education pipeline. Specifically, his work focuses on conducting research on community colleges and their impact on underrepresented students' academic success, student transition to community colleges and 4-year institutions, institutional responses to globalization and the internationalization of higher ed, and the educational outcomes for students of color through the education or throughout the education pipeline. As we go, I'm going to transition to Dr. Garcia in a second, but as we go through this, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You should all have access to that. And then after Dr. Garcia has given his presentation to us, there will be a time for Q&A where you can continue to put things in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask if you want directly. Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Wiseman. And again, that introduction really succinctly describes my research agenda in terms of looking at issues of access and equity, persistence, diversification, and K-12 and community college partnerships. My presentation today touches upon all that. So thank you very much for that introduction. And again, the title, Dual Credit Programs and Their Impact on Rural and Urban Students. My presentation will focus more on rural than urban. And my title to this presentation was originally Challenges, but I changed it to Impact in my PowerPoint here because I think it's more accurate. And so as any presenter, you want to present an outline as to what folks are about to embark in this presentation. So I'll first delve into the background on dual credit, because I think it's something that very few folks really think about. It's a large research topic right now. In the last 5 years, it's really exploded, but Very few studies actually look at the genesis of these programs. Then I'll go into some of the literature, focusing primarily on rural communities with some background, some of the challenges, and I'll describe the theories that I use. And then I'll describe two particular research studies based on my Greater Texas Foundation funded research. One examining the administration, faculty, and staff who were interviewed in one component of my study, and then interviewing and focusing on students as a unit of analysis for understanding experiences of students as they navigated dual credit, then some findings and policy recommendations. And after that, we'll open up for some questions. So if I were to ask anyone here, what are the origins of dual credit, dual enrollment, and some would define them as concurrent enrollment. In some states, they're synonymous. In other states, they're not. Dual credit is when high school students can take a college course and get high school and college credit. Dual enrollment, for the most part, in most states, it's a high school student enrolled at the college. They're dually enrolled, but they're not necessarily getting credit for the high school. And so that's one of the distinctions between dual credit and dual enrollment. And again, policy is different from state to state. But when we think about origins, much of the literature that does talk about the origins of dual credit talk about it from the program developed in partnership with at Syracuse University with the local school districts there. Many of the students that were seniors in high school were dealing with senioritis, in that, they're blowing off their senior year in the sense that they already knew what colleges they had been admitted to, and they're trying to find ways to provide a more rigorous curriculum to seniors to help them transition when they went off to college. So providing college level courses in partnership with Syracuse University, and that's in upstate New York. Then you have others who say that dual credit or dual enrollment programs got started in 1955 in Connecticut. Again, this idea of partnering with a four-year institution and the local schools to provide some kind of more rigorous and accelerated opportunities for students who were thinking about or were planning on going on to a post-secondary environment. And so when the University of Connecticut president in the 1950s had conversations with principals and community members from the boards of school districts, the president wanted the following two things. Number one, that colleges set up a freshman year of college work in high schools throughout the state to be taught by staff selected and paid by the colleges, with the colleges charging the regular tuition and with the credit acceptable to all cooperating colleges in the state of Connecticut. And the second aim was that the high schools set up such a program of their own, using their own teachers who would be approved for it in advance by the colleges in each individual case, and using outlines supplied by colleges, and the colleges would in turn promise to honor credit obtained. Very similar to what we see today, right? If you have a high school teacher teaching a dual credit course, they're usually adjunct instructors hired by the college to teach those dual credit courses. But is that really the genesis or where we begin in terms of dual credit? My response in the work that I've done, because I do some historical work as well, is that dual credit, dual enrollment really begins with the development of the community colleges. And so very briefly, I want to go over the genesis of that. In 1859, at the University of Georgia, William Mitchell, who was a Board of Trustees member and a graduate of Yale College, wanted to develop a kind of college within a college at the University of Georgia in Athens. Because one of the challenges is, at this time in the 1800s, the compulsory educational system, the school districts, the primary schools, the secondary schools weren't fully developed as we see them today. And so there was challenges of being able to bring in students who are academically prepared from whatever feeder schools were in the southern communities. In the Northeast, many of the Ivy League schools today were bringing in students from feeder boarding schools, where the Ivy Leagues knew kind of where those students were coming from in terms of academic preparation. In the South, not so much. So they wanted to develop a way to develop academically prepared students to the University of Georgia. And the University of Georgia was founded by many graduates of Yale College. Hence, why the Yale College Bulldog mascot is the same mascot used at the University of Georgia, the Bulldogs. But the Civil War ended that. And so those plans to develop a joint program in developing a program where high school and the college were collaborating closely, working together to develop the academic skills to help students transition to the university, had to stop because of the Civil War. And then we have William Falwell. William Falwell was the first president of the University of Minnesota. And he wanted to develop a high school in the middle of campus so that students can do grades 13th and 14th at the University of Minnesota, and allow them to also take some courses at the University of Minnesota and some courses at the high school. Many of the faculty at the University of Minnesota really did not like that idea, really opposed them, and those plans ended to have a kind of dual enrollment, dual credit kind of program that would allow high school students to have college courses. But then we get to William R. Harper, who was the first president of the new University of Chicago, brought in by Andrew Carnegie and Carnegie. And so the challenge for developing the University of Chicago, in that they really wanted to be a research university. The University of Chicago was founded in 1890, and the William R. Harper, with a PhD, wanted to develop the highest research intensive institution in the United States, rivaling Johns Hopkins, is what he wanted. Raided several faculty from Clark University, brought him to the University of Chicago. And so here was the president of the University of Chicago, who basically cherry-picked all his faculty and said, we will be a true research university. So in order for the University of Chicago to be a real graduate level, research-oriented university, William R. Harper really wanted to avoid having undergraduate students, or weeding out some of the students that may have weak academic preparation based on the underdevelopment of the compulsory public education K-12 system at that time. And so he approached Northwestern University and said, hey, would you do the undergrad and we do grad? Northwestern said, no, we will never give up our graduate education. He went to other colleges. They said, no, we're not going to give up what we do. And we're not going to turn to 2 years only. So he ended up doing was reaching out to a colleague of his, Stanley Brown, who was the high school principal at Joliet Township High School, and said, would you consider having a college on your high school campus? And he agreed to it. About 45 minutes southwest of Chicago, we had the establishment of the first junior college in 1901. And Stanley Brown becomes not only the principal of the high school, but he also becomes the college president. The high school teachers also become the college instructors. And so when you think about what Joliet High School was doing with high school principal Stanley Brown and the collaborations of William R. Harper, you see this development of dual enrollment, dual credit, because the high school students were at Joliet High School, were taking classes at the high school and then taking classes at the junior college, all in the same building. The high school teachers would then transition over to become the college instructors, And you see this development of what we see today. And so here we have another example in Pasadena, where you have Pasadena High School that was established in 1911. And they set out to include Pasadena Junior College there. So in 1924, Pasadena Junior College was added on to Pasadena High School. And additional land was purchased in 1923 to make that happen. So that you would have the Pasadena High School students and the Pasadena Junior College students all in one campus. And this plan took place in 1911, which you see them emulating what they were doing in the Midwest, in the far West. And so 4 years later, here you have the high school campus and the college campus of Pasadena High School and Pasadena Junior College, and they developed this 644 curriculum model. And so the last 4 years of Pasadena High School and the junior college, you would have the 11th and 12th grades referred to as the lower Bulldogs, and 13th, 14th grades being known as the upper Bulldogs. But again, high school students taking college courses and kind of like early college high schools that we see today. And so that is kind of where we see much of the genesis of these junior colleges and high schools and the implementation of dual enrollment, dual credit. And even here in the state of Texas, in Wichita Falls in 1922, we see that most of the junior colleges were situated or developed within the high schools. There weren't campuses that were being developed at the very beginning that have their own campuses with their own facilities. No, they were being established within high schools, and the districts developed the curriculum. Many of the teachers at the high schools were teaching at the junior colleges. So again, this is not a new concept, this idea of dual enrollment and dual credit. And so talking about the literature on challenges of education, particularly with rural communities, it's a bit challenging. And the reason why I say is this. We know that higher education is critical for upward socioeconomic mobility for a variety of different students. And after the Great Recession that we had in the mid-2000s, and after COVID, much of the jobs that we saw that were emerging or hiring after these shocks to the economic systems were those for individuals that had college degrees. And so we see that there is a long corpus of research that talks about the importance of college attainment. Unfortunately, and we see this in the research, that students from rural communities don't have access to the same opportunities than students from suburban and even urban communities. So how do we alleviate that? And so the challenges with answering that question I just posed is that much of the research is very scant when it comes to communities and rural environments, which is extremely problematic and challenging because 1/3 of all public schools in the United States are in rural communities. And in 52% of all public school districts are within rural communities. So how is it that we have this type of numbers in terms of our public educational system situated in rural schools, yet very little research on rural communities, and given the challenges that are presented to these students? And so the research that is on rural students, it tells us that students aspire to go to college. They want to go to college. Unfortunately, as I stated earlier, there are barriers that they face given the rural context. And some of those things are that, many rural schools, due to low tax base, low to numbers in terms of students, in various diverse industries that may be lacking, there's very little opportunities to take AP courses or IB courses. Because in order to be an AP certified teacher, you have to have some of those credentials. And sometimes you have such a small number of teachers that you have teachers teaching out of their subject area of expertise. And so lacking AP in comparison to suburban and urban students, the lack of a rigorous academic curriculum creates challenges when applying to four-year institutions. And again, the financial constraints of all this and the isolation that produces unintended consequences, right? So some of those challenges is sometimes a lack of college-going culture. Why? Because when you are in certain areas and industries, farming, oil industries, for example, out here in West Texas, you know, students who graduate from high school can be making six figures. So why go off to college? Why bring on a debt load that your family may not be able to afford? Also, maybe first-generation college students, right? So some of those constraints are there, in addition to lacking the adequate counseling resources. And we know from the research that advising is critically important when working with students and their families as to what career options can be afforded by participating in some kind of post-secondary trajectory. And so how can we support youth who come from disadvantaged programs or communities? Dual credit is a potential where it creates favorable conditions that promote college aspiration, identity formation, and alleviating conditions that stifle college access, particularly from schools that may lack AP, IB, and counseling. So what is, again, many of you know what dual credit is, but very briefly, dual credit are programs that allow high school students to enroll in college courses. Those partnerships can be at 4 years, can be at 2 years, institutions. They can be at teaching institutions, they can be at research universities. But these are opportunities for students to be exposed to a collegiate, rigorous course or courses that exposes them to what college would be like. Students who are enrolled, you know, these courses could be done on a college campus, or they can be done at the high school. They're done by college instructors who are full-time college instructors, or they can be high school teachers who have master's degrees in the discipline that they're teaching at for the dual credit course, but they are hired by the college. And so the interactions with college instructors is there, but also a collegiate culture and peer network. So if you're a high school student and you're constantly at the high school, you're interacting with other high school students. But if you're a high school student and you're plucked in a college campus, whether 2-year or 4-year, you're surrounded by college students, and it increases your network and exposes you to the culture of what a collegiate environment is, and demystifies it in terms of what it is and what it is not. And so these collegiate environments allow students to potentially be removed from an under-resourced school. And sometimes, because we know students are discussed among teachers. You know, I know from my own personal experience, you know, every time I would move up from one grade to another, from one period to the other, teachers already knew that I was the problem child. I was the one who was going to be, you know, disobedient and so on and so forth. So even when I wanted a fresh start, I could never really get a fresh start. So being in a collegiate environment allows students to have a fresh start, even though they're still in high school, to interact with college instructors that might not even know they're the high school students. And so providing the opportunity to interact in a collegiate environment with not just students, but also with faculty, admin, so on and so forth, really provides an opportunity to increase a college-going mindset and college identity. And just to look at some of the current numbers, 48 states, including DC, have dual enrollment policies. 27 states require that either the high school or the college notify both the students and the parents that there are dual enrollment programs or dual credit programs. So ensuring that parents and students know. The rest, do not make it a requirement. And there are also criteria for participating. Some of them can be just being grade level. You have to be a junior and senior. Others will say you have to pass a certain a state exam, like here in Texas with TSI. Others just require a letter of recommendation or a recommendation from the principal or a teacher to the college to allow them to enroll. And again, it is a state-by-state basis. So again, here we have our high school on the left, the college on the right, and allowing students to participate and be in both environments allows them to increase their social capital and networks. So talking about theory, so much of the work that I do and I'm going to present on my work is based on 4 particular theories. One is anticipatory socialization, and anticipatory socialization was first introduced by Robert Merton out of Columbia University. He was a sociologist. When you talk about the socialization of being a group member A to group member B. So if you're a group member A, a high school student, you're thinking about being a college student down the road, that's group B. What are the norms, attitudes, and behaviors that one needs to possess to navigate that world? And so by providing the anticipatory socialization of what it means to be a college student while still a high school student helps in that transition. The other thing is role rehearsal. Role rehearsal has been used heavily in healthcare professions, particularly in nursing, like nursing programs, or even medical doctors, physicians have their residency. So before they can actually, practice medicine, they have to do residencies. Those are all ways of role rehearsal. So the fact that a high school student can take a college course, be surrounded by college students and college instructors, it provides them the ability to role rehearse being a college student while still in high school, which would aid them, in theory, their transition to college. The other theories that I use in my work is this idea of social capital, and I'm sure none of you have heard social capital, maybe one or two, being facetious here, of course. But social capital, there are a number of scholars, particularly in sociology, that use social capital. We have Putnam in political science, Coleman and Bourdieu in sociology, and many others. But I use social capital as defined by Ricardo Stanton Salazar, where he defines it as resources and key forms of institutional support embedded in a multi-layered system of social structures, beginning with a fundamental network analytic structure, which in turn is embedded in a complex and usually hierarchical structures found in formal and complex organization and institutions. Now, he developed his social capital theory based on schools. We know that high schools, community colleges, four-year institutions are very complex. They are hierarchical. And how do you navigate them? And so that is the reason why I use social capital as defined by Stan Salazar. I also use funds of knowledge as defined by Ricardo Stan Salazar. I know that Luis Mo and others at the University of Arizona have their own funds of knowledge in terms of what students bring to the classroom, in terms of the knowledge they have. But Ricardo Stan Salazar flips it in terms of how do individuals who are first-generation college students receive the knowledge that they need to navigate these complex and hierarchical structures that we know as high schools and colleges and universities. So so he defines it as implicit and explicit socialization into institutional discourses that regulate communication, interaction, exchange with mainstream institutional spheres. And I'll go very quickly on this, but he talks about the 7 forms of funds of knowledge. And one of them is, the first one is communication. How often do we get students whose parents have done everything for them? The helicopter parents, right? Parents who are constantly communicating to the school, interacting with the school of what their child needs. So that when the student gets to the college, parents have done everything for them. So in funds of knowledge, Ricardo Salazar would say, students need to understand the ways of communication, how communication should be done in order to extrapolate resources and information that one needs to have. I'm not going to go through all of these, but but the first one's important. The second one, understand the organizational bureaucratic funds of knowledge, which is the knowledge or understanding of how bureaucracy of the organization operates. How many students in our community colleges, I'll say community college because I'm a community college product, show up and after 1 or 2 weeks no longer show up, then they get an F and it's like, well, why did I get an F? I stopped taking the class after the first week of the semester. And it's like, well, didn't you know that you had to withdraw so that you would get your money back and not get a grade? It's the bureaucracy of the paperwork that one needs to do in order to navigate it successfully. So being a high school student and being on a college campus, understanding somewhat what the organizational structure is and the bureaucracy within the post-secondary institution while still a high school student allows you to easily transition, in theory, to the institution because you already have those funds of knowledge. By being on a college campus, you already have some funds of knowledge in terms of ways of communication, right? And so those are the ways in which the funds of knowledge as defined by Stan Salazar I operate. And so I won't go into all this. I'll go into now my study. And what I try to do is really understand the ways in which the organization via administrators, faculty, work with dual enrollment programs to help students at the college level, once they're on the college campus, and also trying to understand, is there a difference of experience between those students who are taking dual enrollment, dual credit courses at the high school and on the college campus? And so, and this is a case study approach, multi-campus, multi-site case study. And the reason why I use a case study is, as Creswell says, how individuals are enabled and constrained by social resources, socially situated in an interactive performances, and how narrators develop interpretations of those social interactions. So, here we have urban, rural students in high schools that may be under-resourced, maybe not, taking dual credit courses, either at a 2-year or 4-year, or those dual credit courses may be at the high school or the college. So a case by multi-case study was what I selected. For data collected, I went to several community colleges throughout the state, but for the purposes of the administration staff, I'm only including data from 2 campuses. They were both HSI, served a large Latinx community. Both were rural and served a huge service area. And you can probably imagine when you have a 500 square mile service area, how do you get high school students in rural communities to drive to a college campus, right? So we have to get the college to come to the high school. And how does that happen? So that's the site selection and the data sources for the administration and staff. And I'm gonna skip that. And for the students, I interviewed 22, a little bit blank in here, 22 students throughout the state and looking at their experiences after. So they weren't minors when I interviewed them. They're already college students. They had graduated over the age of 18 for IRB purposes. And I had them reflect on how their experience in dual credit influenced their decision to matriculate at a four-year institution, and understand, was there a difference between taking dual credit on a high school campus or a college campus? And so I'm going to skip the data analysis here because I want to go into some of my findings. So what do community college administrators, staff, and instructors perceive are the reasons why rural students participate in dual credit? Well, they indicated the family was a huge reason why they participate in dual credit. Saving money. Again, as I stated earlier, their literature talks and tells us, suggests that rural students have desire to go to college. Unfortunately, they have some of the lowest college attendance rates. But one of the reasons why that's a challenge for many students from rural communities who go off to college is financial reasons. And so by participating in dual credit, these administrators and staff and faculty were telling me that one of the reasons why is to get ahead and saving some money, and also following peers. And so here's what one faculty member says: a lot now is their brothers and sisters or siblings or family members who had taken dual credit or gone to college. I think they have an idea of they know what college is because of their siblings and family friends, and they want to go in that direction. Another administrator said that dual credit is great for them. It's great for parents because the dual credit classes are so much cheaper, and especially at the community college versus the university, and they're living at home. Parents aren't paying for them to live away from home and all that. So I think it really gives them a good boost. Again, financial reasons. And then another one of the instructors as well, the reason why they're doing this is because they're buddies. And so I see a lot of, friends, all my friends doing this, so I'm going to do it. But again, there's a whole corpus of research on peer effects. And so if some of their high achieving friends are participating in a certain program, the peer effects will induce others to participate had they not known that their friend was participating. So that's some of that. The second research question I had was, what do administrative staff and instructors within community college perceive as the benefits of dual credit participation for rural students? And here are the key findings for that. Understand the academic expectations, social networks and interactions, demystifying the college going culture, and develop a college identity. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I will provide some evidence from my interviews. One said, I think they gained tremendously from it because, a lot of them figured out how much more they have to study in college courses versus what they are doing in high school for one thing. And they suddenly realized that, the high school course isn't nearly as hard as college courses was. Chris, who was a counselor, says dual credit courses have more emphasis on critical thinking skills that they have never been exposed to if they stay strictly in high school environment. In high school courses, they are not going to have that benefit when they come into the college. So I think that benefits them a lot. Adam says, well, socially, I would say the benefits is that they are exposed to that type of environment or culture or things that they can discuss in class and or in papers, probably being more open to asking questions about what's college about, having to develop some sort of plan after high school and continue whatever they're working on. And again, finally, with Chris, I like this quote where he says, I think for those that come straight in terms of straight to the college, don't have the concept of what they are going to face in college, and they have no idea what study skills are needed and how to interact with people. And I think those kids that have been through dual credit understand better how do you navigate college? How do you know what's acceptable and what's not? Again, this is what the anticipatory socialization, role rehearsal, social network as defined by Stan Salazar, and the funds of knowledge all interacting together as theories how in terms that promotes transition and easement from high school to college. And then moving on to the student study, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go by this kind of quickly. The questions I asked students was, is there well, my research question wasn't the interview protocol, but my own personal research question. Is there a difference in experience between students who participate in dual credit at their local high school or those who take dual credit on a college campus? And for those students who took classes at the college campus, at the two-year college, they talked about belongingness. Like, I belong here. After, being a high school student and being put in this college environment, I wasn't sure if I would be something I can do, but many of them said, yeah, I belong here. So here's Ada, who says, I'm a college student, but I'm just like very, very young one, just a super young college student. I felt like I belonged there. I'm like, hey, I have the right to an education just like everyone else. And the validation. Now, all these names are pseudonyms that my participants picked out. So Red Sniper, I did not give the name. That was the participant student in my study who talked about and said, feeling that like I had to prove myself in some way, that even though I was a teenager, I was still serious and mature enough to be taking college level courses. And Bree, who says, gradually became something that I felt it was normal because I was just used to going to campus and it felt very comfortable, right? So how do you ease and demystify college, if you've never actually been on a college campus? So those are the students who took dual credit on the college campus. But I also had students who were doing it at the high school. And one of them says, you get comfortable here. It's a dual credit, yeah, but it's still at the high school. And so this student says, you're who you're around, like, who your instructor is, you're going to know them, you're going to be more comfortable with them, but with like communicating with them, because communication is really a big thing, you're going to be more comfortable communicating with them and all that stuff like that. So basically, the high school teacher was also the college instructor. Their high school friends were basically the bulk of their college peers. So even though the curriculum was collegiate level, it didn't really have the same kind of collegiate environment that those students who went to the college campus said they were having. But still not completely lost. And so one other participant said that but having that, I think if you would have had like going to at least one campus for like a college class, I think that would have helped me a little bit more, because you're meeting people outside of your little typical high school bubble. You're meeting new people. And again, social networks is important. How dual credit kind of provides that. This was one of the students that did all their dual credit at the high school campus, never took any courses at the college level. And so I have a few more things, but I'm just going to go into kind of discussion policy implications, which there are several. I'm not going to go through every single one from my various studies, but I think it's critical that high schools and community colleges need to develop more robust partnerships. We see from the data that I showed about state policies that some states have it, some states don't. Some require that parents be notified and students be notified either by the high school or the college. But not all states are doing that, and maybe not all states that are required to do that, schools are doing that in partnership. It's like, well, let the college do it or let the high school do it. Well, why not both of them do it? Professional development. And the reason why I had this is because one of the findings I had was that some of the young girls, and I'm being intentional when I say girls, when they're 15, 16, 17-year-old girls taking college courses at the college campus with 19, 20, 21-year-old men, these men assume that they're 18 and over women. And so there is challenges that some of my participants talked about being in this hypersexual environment, because when we think of colleges, we think of like, Animal House and fraternities and football games, that some of the students told me they had male students stalking them and they didn't realize they were minors. And so wanting to date them, so on and so forth. And also the mental health stress of being a high school student at 15, 16 years old and being in a class with adults, that there's mental health issues and stressors that are being introduced, that having professional counselors hired at the high school and the college may help. And also, how do you institutionalize dual enrollment programs from the peripheral to the core of what many of our schools do? And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and open it up to any questions folks may have, given that we have about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Really appreciate the background on community colleges and transitioning into dual credit and how that works for students in general and the students that you researched with. I put a note in the chat. You're welcome to ask questions using the chat or make comments, but you're also welcome to unmute. So now's the time.
I don't bite, I promise.
Dr. Garcia, I have a very bad habit of not having a very good wait time. So I have a question for you. Just as someone else prepares theirs, maybe this is an easy answer. So a lot of dual credit programs, well, I think the nature of the dual credit program often depends on the type of institution that is participating in the program, whether it's a community college or a four-year university or something else like that. Do you see that there are differences in participation based on the type of institution that's participating? For example, there's some research that shows that maybe low-income students or students whose family may not have a history of going to or attending college might be less likely to enroll than others in dual credit programs. Is that repeated? Like, is that kind of trend? Is there evidence for that?
Yeah, and when I was doing my research, I was looking at Friendship High School, which is a highly resourced school here in the Lubbock area, right? Their partnership is with Angelo State University, right? And then you have other schools like Post High School, with their dual credit program is with South Plains Community College, right? And then you have Estacado, I believe, and their dual enrollment program is here with Texas Tech, right? So there's these differences in terms of who the partnerships are, right? And where the credit is going to come from. But the challenge for many of these highly resourced schools in very affluent communities is that they'll pay for the students to take the dual credit courses and even paying for the books. At other school districts that may not have the same tax base or funding, they say, we'll pay, the student has to pay for it, the family has to pay for the dual credit. And if you, for whatever reason, drop out or do poorly, then that's your money lost. But if you do well, we will give you that money that you paid for. We'll reimburse you for that. So for some families who don't have the money or, resources at home to kind of really showcase the importance of dual credit, they're not going to enroll, while other students who are already going to college, like at Friendship High School, many of the students go on to some kind of post-secondary education. Not only is their dual credit paid for, but it's with a four-year institution. And when you transfer those credits over, there's a lot of elitism that happens, right, between four-year institutions and the acceptance of those credit hours. And so, it's like, the discrepancies and the challenges. I mean, that's really one of the other reasons why I initially had my title challenges, because those are some of the challenges, right? Those who are off to college and taking AP and IB courses are also more likely the folks who are going to participate in dual credit. Those who are least likely to go to college are also least likely to participate in dual credit. And the other thing is, and this is, I'll stop and open up for other questions. I interviewed a counselor at a rural high school who said to me, when I asked, what are some of the challenges? He said, oh, well, the challenge is the community. I said, what do you mean the community? Well, I have a lot of folks who say, why are you getting those kids' hopes up about going to college? And I said to the counselor, I said, well, who are those people? Oh, they're the landowners. They're the farmers, the landowners. And so many of the kids who are participating are these Hispanic Latino kids whose parents work in the farms or in the land. And they want to make sure that they have future workers. And so they don't want to expose them to collegiate curriculum so that they take off. And so this idea was that there's pressures from the local community, from landowners who say, why are you getting these Latino kids hopes up? You shouldn't be offering a dual credit for them. That offer it for our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Other questions or comments?
Yes. Hi, Hugo. Thank you for all of this. I work with Educate Texas and the college and career readiness school models across the state. And so I get to work with all of the early college and P-Tech high schools across the state. And so most of the challenges that we seem to be facing right now is getting the high schools to want to be in the program that exists and the programs that exist. And most of them are, all of them by rule, by the state, have to pay for all of the college and all of the textbooks. There is no money out for the students. And so when we get into rural schools and we start looking at the people that want to participate and the people that can participate in those programs, what we see is part of what you were talking about, in that a lot of the families get cold feet in the process because they start to feel like, well, my kid's in high school and I want them to have the high school experience and I don't want them to have to mess with the college experience while they're still in high school. In other words, we have families, structures that are built around, there is such a thing as high school and you're supposed to go to prom, go to football games, go to basketball games, participate as a high school student without the pressure of college classes, even if it's free, even if it doesn't cost you anything. So I'm wondering if you saw any of that. I would like to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and again, it's, I didn't interview parents, and I'm working on a Spencer grant right now, and Tina's aware of that, where I do want to expand to the parents and get what are the parents' messaging, right? I mean, from my study, when I interviewed faculty, counselors, staff, so on and so forth, at high schools and community colleges, the family really encouraged it, but it's because of the siblings, right? It was the siblings that were encouraging, not necessarily the parents. And again, the challenge that I heard quite a bit, not just from counselors and instructors, but also the high school student or college students when they were reflecting back on their high school experience, is that mental health, right? Is the challenge of they're many of them were already high achieving, right? So they were part of the ASB, they played sports, they're trying to help out their parents, or maybe had a single parent household. And so they had to have a part-time job. And oh, by the way, I'm taking these college courses, and it's like the stress and the mental pressures that these students were dealing with. One of my participants said one of their best friends had committed suicide due to the stress. Nobody really exactly knows, but the root, exactly what, there was no suicide note or anything, but the challenge was this student knew that their friend was having a real challenge and was having mental breakdowns, trying to appease the parents, trying to appease the high school teachers and the high school counselors, their friends, and also trying to excel academically at the college, that it's a real pressure cooker. And so we need professional counselors that deal with mental stress and all these intricacies that happen to somebody who's 15, 16, still trying to understand who they are, what they want to be, where they want to go, and have some level of self-determination, than constantly being bombarded by messages, do this, do that, do this, and being so stretched thin that only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep is a real challenge. So anyway, I'll stop there. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's what came off the top of my head.
Well, to your credit in looking at that, we keep on seeing in these schools. One of the schools that I work with is Estacado, that you mentioned earlier, and they are, the success of the program is almost entirely based on, we're finding out all the way across the state, is the counselors that are there in the school. And it's not necessarily the counselor that assigns the classes or anything. It's the ones that are the liaisons between the college and the high school itself. So you have these 2 or 3 counselors that their whole job is to make sure they kind of act as surrogate parents for the students, to liaison with the professors at the college, to talk to them, to especially first gen students that don't have anywhere to go to get help or to get information. So if a student
Or
starts,
they don't know where to go. It's
Right.
not that they don't have nowhere to go, they just don't know where to go. And
Right.
the other challenge is that sometimes these students don't tell the counselors what they're dealing with. They're trying to
right,
be the good student, the dutiful student, trying to help out their family, that and then also with the Latino community, there's this level of machismo, right? Guys just don't tell or talk about their feelings. It's not what we do. We
Or-
see that in adult men, but we also see that in adolescents as well. So it's a real challenge, James.
yeah, it's very interesting. And so we really have to work with those, I don't even know what to call them, coaches or counselors that liaison between the college and the high school. Seems to be the key element in success in those programs.
I agree.
Well, I want to jump in here. We are at time. Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for sharing your insider on community colleges and dual credit with us today. And thank you to Dr. Durham and others who've had comments and questions. Really enjoyed this. For those of you who might be interested in reviewing this later, or if you're just coming across this and watching the video later, that's the point. There is a video. This is being recorded. We'll have a copy of this up on our ExpandED website for you to take a look at anytime you want. Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. If people wanted to get in touch with you, could they email you? You're muted. I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yes, the answer is yes.
At Texas Tech, our emails for many of us are first name dot last name at ttu.edu. Thank you, Dr. Garcia, and thank you everybody for being a part of this.